welcome everyone. Thank you so much for giving away part of your Friday evening to spend with us today. So my name's Liz Rieger and I'm joined this evening by Dr. Kristen Murray. And we'll be sharing some information with you about 3 postgraduate degrees that we offer in the Research School of Psychology at the Australian National University. And so we'll start today with Kristen will talk to you about the Master of Professional Psychology, and then I'll share some information about 2 postgraduate degrees that we have that are training people to be clinical psychologists. So that's our Master of Clinical Psychology and our PhD in Clinical Psychology. And then we're keen to leave plenty of time for questions and answers. So please make note of any questions that come up as we go through the material, because we'll be really keen to hear from you. So before I hand over to Kristen, for those of you who are outside of Canberra and don't know the Australian National University, the ANU is located in Canberra. Canberra was actually ranked as the world's best city to live in by the OECD a few years ago. And that's not a surprise to those of us who live in Canberra, but it's often a surprise for people who are outside of Canberra. And I think the reasons that we would have got that ranking is Canberra is a beautiful city to live in. It's got all the amenities of a big city in terms of great access to theatre and cinema and cultural institutions and restaurants and shopping, but it doesn't have the inconveniences of big cities such as air pollution and congested traffic. We've got plenty of access to green spaces, so it's a good place to live. The ANU was founded in 1946 and its mission was to advance the nation's scholarship and research to a level of the best international standards. We currently have about 4,000 staff and 21,000 students who come from all over the world. Over 100 countries are represented here on campus. Our campus is close to the CBD and Lake Burley Griffin, and it's surrounded by native bushland, as you can see in the picture that we have there. The ANU is repeatedly ranked as Australia's #1 university, and in the recent world rankings we were 29th university in the world. In terms of the Research School of Psychology, we were established in 1949. We also rank highly in the world. We're currently 31st of all psychology schools internationally. We have 36 academic staff, 6 staff who work in our psychology clinic. I'll talk about that a little later on. We have 7 external instructors to bring in their high level of expertise, and we have 9 professional staff who support the academic staff and students in our undertakings. As I mentioned, we have a psychology clinic, and that's where the students in our clinical programs are developing their skills as clinicians. That clinic serves the students of the university and also members of the general public who come to our clinic for psychological assessment and therapy. The Research School of Psychology actually offers 5 postgraduate degrees, and we'll be talking about 3 of those today. When we ask students to describe the key characteristics of our school, they tend to say things like describing the staff as very friendly and accessible, that as a school we're very much emphasising and balancing theory and research with teaching you applied skills. They describe a great campus environment and, as I said, an easy city to live in with lots to do. So I'll hand over now to Kristen so that she can talk to you about the Master of Professional Psychology.
Thank you, Liz. So I'm really happy to be here to talk to you about a new program that we've started in the Research School of Psychology this year, and that's the Master of Professional Psychology program here at ANU. So the MPP program is a 2-year postgraduate training program, and it's to set you up for your career in professional psychology. So if you've dreamed about becoming a psychologist, this is a really exciting option that we've started here in 2020. So this year we actually had our first first cohort of students start. So we have a wonderful, bright and enthusiastic group of students who've started training with us here in RSP. And of course, they'll move into the second year of their program next year in 2021. So we're thrilled with how it's been running to date, and we're really excited to welcome new students from next year as well. So something that can be challenging or confusing for people when they think about their professional training programs for psychology are that there are many different options for you to think about. So at a minimum, to be registered as a psychologist in Australia with the Psychology Board of Australia, you have to complete a minimum of 6 years of training and study in an accredited program or sequence in psychology. So at a minimum, that's what is required to become a generally registered psychologist. How you get there can look different ways. So there are options where people do 4 years of study. So you may do a 3-year undergraduate program in psychology and then complete an honours year or a graduate diploma, depending on what it's called, which is your 4th year of study, and then do a 2-year internship. So that pathway is sometimes referred to as a 4+2, and that's actually a pathway that's ceasing in a couple of years' time. So there's a new option that you can take, which is the 5-year of University of Study and a 1-year internship. So the 5+1 is sometimes what it's referred to, and that's what the MPP program is. And Liz will be speaking about some 6-year university trained options in the clinical program here in RSP as well. So thinking about the different options that you have, the 5+1 is a new option that's been introduced recently in Australia, and this is what the MPP program fulfills here within RSP. So this is a little bit of a picture for you of the different ways that you can become a registered psychologist in Australia. So what typically happens is people complete their undergraduate training, so for example a 3-year program, and then they enrol in a standalone 4th year of study. So that could be often referred to as an honours year or a graduate diploma, depending on the particular 4th year that they're completing. And then they'll apply for postgraduate study following that 4th year of training. What's unique about the ANU MPP is it actually combines the 4th and the 5th year together. So instead of going in and doing a 4th year standalone, you actually come into the 4th year program after your undergraduate study, and you then move straight into your 5th year as part of a combined or integrated training program. So that's quite unique, and it's actually really exciting for us to have a program that starts in that 4th year and then moves straight into the 5th year of training. So for those that do complete that pathway, as I said, it forms part of what we refer to as the 5+1 pathway. So you would do your undergraduate training, your 4th and 5th year within the Master of Professional Psychology here at ANU, and then you would go and do a 1-year internship out in the community that's organised by you and administered through the Psychology Board of Australia. To then become eligible for general registration, you would complete the National Psychology exam. So it's part of this kind of 5+1 program pathway within the training here. So as I mentioned already, the MPP is really unique, and what's particularly exciting about it is we are the first program in Australia to combine the 4th and 5th years of study into one 2-year full-time program. So we're really excited to be innovative and leading this nationally in Australia. What's unique about the MPP program is that it's got a real emphasis on building your professional practice skills from day one. So you move into that 4th year of study and you advance your theoretical knowledge of psychology in a range of different areas. You also develop research skills, but from the very first day of training, you're starting to apply those skills to develop your professional practice competencies. And we really believe that's important to help you develop into outstanding psychologists when you become generally registered or start seeing clients as part of your training. And as I mentioned, there's a sequence of study post the MPP. So there's a year of internship and the National Psychology exam, which then lead towards general registration. So the MPP program itself includes 3 main components. One is coursework. So through both the 1st and 2nd year of the program, or your 4th and 5th years of study, you undertake coursework in a range of different areas. And I'll speak about that a little bit more in a moment. You also complete research projects. What's really unique about these projects is that your 4th year project is done with a team. So you actually have a group of MPP students who work together with a supervisor, and you can look at any number of different topic areas relevant to professional psychology. And you also undertake an individual research project in the second year or your 5th year of study that's applied to the professional practice setting. You also complete a practicum placement, and this is done in your second year, second semester, and you can do that in a range of different settings. So we're developing placement experiences that help people meet the competencies they need to meet for professional psychology training, but also give them a breadth of experience in all the different areas that psychologists may work. So we have a really collegial and friendly team working on the MPP program, and we're thrilled with the progress of the program this year. As you can see, both Liz and myself are directly involved in the MPP program, and we have a range of professional and academic staff that are contributing their expertise and supporting students very closely in our first year and beyond. We're also really proud to work closely with Canberra Health Services. So we have a really close partnership with Canberra Health, and they've been very closely involved in developing the program, both in its initial design, but in an ongoing way as well. And they'll be providing support to the program, including placement opportunities for students as well, to further their skills in professional psychology. So I think what I imagine you're wondering is, why do I want to do the MPP program? And so if you're someone who's passionate about working with people, if you've wanted to pursue a career in professional psychology and you're interested in learning how to develop and adapt your skills to a broad range of settings, this is the program for you. Our emphasis is on creating psychologists that can work in any number of sectors with any number of problems. And that makes you really flexible and adaptable to the range of areas that psychologists can contribute in our community. We have a very strong values base in our learning approach, and we really emphasise reflective learning and being values-led in the way that we teach and enact the program here in RSP at the ANU. And at the beginning of the year, we developed a vision and mission statement that directs all that we do in the program. So both expectations around our graduates, the outcomes that we seek for them, but also the way we conduct ourselves within the school and the staff that lead the program. So our vision is to create a society where psychological practice and science support people, communities and nations to flourish. And our mission in creating the MPP program was to train and educate the future generations of psychologists to deliver high quality services, to deliver those in diverse settings and contexts, to be innovative and to lead with integrity and excellence, to respond and adapt to evolving contexts, which 2020 seems to provide a very good example for, but to also be evidence-based in their practice. So at all times reflecting on what we know works and making sure that that guides our practice as professional psychologists, and to be reflective and respectful in all that we do. So we aim to do this through a collaborative environment that's open and enthusiastic and respectful in and of itself. And we believe that's the most important thing when developing a program, to support the intellectual and personal growth of the students that work with us. And we do this because we believe it's important that the community and every single person in it can access high quality and extensive psychological services to support them in the goals that they have and in their own well-being and quality of life. We also see the MPP as having really significant strengths in being able to pursue a broad range of areas. So as I said, if you're interested in being able to apply your knowledge in psychology and your skills to any number of domains, this is a really nice fit for you in terms of your training. So we know that general psychologists work in a range of settings. So it includes mental health, but of course includes education, population health or public health programs, policy and corporate and marketing areas. And there's a lot of areas that we don't actually have psychologists that we wish we did, and a lot of careers that we don't even know exist yet. And really our purpose in the MPP program is to help you develop skills that will allow you to adapt and change and work in a range of different settings. And so we're looking forward to seeing our graduates create jobs that don't exist now because of the way they're able to adapt and use their skills in flexible ways. So what do you do then in the MPP program? So we have 2 years of coursework, as I mentioned earlier. The first year, your 4th year, is really setting up the foundations for professional practice. So you learn about self-reflection and self-awareness, the key theories and aspects of the work that we do around diagnosis, but also regulatory structures in psychology practice in Australia. You do work around how to contextualise the knowledge that you have, so the kinds of impacts from a social, cultural or developmental perspective that we need to be aware of and work effectively with. You undertake your introductory training in psychological assessment, so principles of assessment and some assessment tools that you might use as a psychologist, and also psychological interventions and counselling skills. You then, of course, complete research training. You have a statistics and research methods course, which is very applied in its training, and you complete your group-based project. So we have projects at the moment looking at how to improve body image through interventions in the population, but also how we classify and diagnose borderline personality disorder. So we have a range of projects running at the moment that are really interesting and important in the contribution that they make to the practice field. In your 5th year, you then advance these skills. So you learn advanced assessment and intervention strategies for more complex presentations, but also specific assessments like cognitive assessments or personality assessments. You develop your professional practice and ethical practice skills further by doing a more detailed course around what it means to practice ethically as a psychologist. You undertake an intensive unit preparing you for placement. So you do simulation-based training as a very significant part of that to help you develop your practical skills and apply your knowledge with support and feedback from staff. And then, of course, you complete your placement in the 2nd semester of that 2nd year. Alongside that, you do an advanced topics in professional psychology, and each year that will look a little bit different from the last. And the aim there is to be able to get exposure across different areas that you may practice in professional psychology, like health settings, education, forensic or organisational, and it will change depending on the staff that we have who can come and teach into that course. And you, of course, complete your final research project. And as I mentioned, this is an applied practice project, so could include a case study or an evaluation of a program on a placement site, for example. So it's really designed to integrate the scientist practitioner principles with your practice. So how do you apply then for the MPP? I know you're all wondering this. So the entry requirement is a 3-year accredited sequence in psychology and a GPA minimum of 5 out of 7. There are ANU English language admission requirements you need to be aware of. And it's also particularly important to note that there are also Psychology Board of Australia English language registration standards that you need to meet at the end of the 4th year. So there is a hurdle requirement. You need to complete and pass everything in the 4th year of the program to move into the 5th year, so the 2nd year of the program. And part of that is also achieving provisional registration with the Psychology Board of Australia, and that comes with it additional requirements, including a different English language standard. So you need to make sure that you're aware of that and are able to be meeting that at that point of transitioning from the 4th to the 5th year. There's an online application form, and it includes a number of supplementary materials and a supplementary form that details those extra parts of documentation. So it includes things like a referee reports, a CV, a personal statement, and other aspects of documentation required as part of the assessment of your application. So we have a capped number of program places each year, and that depends on the supervisory resources that we have. Half of those are for ANU undergraduates and 10% reserved for Indigenous applicants. There are indicative fees, and these fees that I've provided are available on the ANU programs and courses website. So that's a really good place to get information about the program and keep that up to date. So how do you apply? You apply through UAC, the University's Admissions Centre. That's at the end of October, and that includes all of your documentation. So we need to have all of that by that date to start making assessments of applicants. Those applicants who are shortlisted for an interview will be invited to attend a suitability interview, and that the aim of that is to assess your suitability for professional training in psychology. And then from that interview process, we make final offers for places in the program. So if you would like more information about the MPP, and I would encourage you to go and have a look and find out more about the program, you can visit the ANU Programs and Courses website, and I've included that link on the slide here, but also on the next slide as well. You're welcome to contact us to ask any questions that you have. We have dedicated staff to support students with inquiries, but of course you can contact us too. And you may find some information on the Psychology Board of Australia, the Australian Psychology Accreditation Council, and APS websites helpful as well in supporting your application where there's additional information there. So thank you so much for having me. I'm going to pass back to Liz to talk to you about the clinical psychology offerings here in the school.
Hello again. So as I mentioned at the outset, I'm going to talk about our 2 degrees that comprise our clinical psychology program. And you can see there a picture of most of the people who will be supporting you in your journey in becoming a clinical psychologist. So if you became a clinical psychologist, what would you do? Why would you be interested in enrolling in one of these degrees? So as a clinical psychologist, you might perform cognitive assessments. We just skipped a slide there, I'll go back a bit. You might undertake the diagnosis of people with mental health problems, and that occurs across the lifespan. You might perform cognitive assessments, for example, assessing somebody's IQ or whether they're having any difficulties in their cognitive functioning, such as their memory function, or whether they're having learning difficulties. You might provide psychotherapy for those people experiencing psychological distress, which might range from mild psychological problems to actually quite severe and complex and chronic conditions. And you might do that in individual one-on-one therapy, or you might also be involved in conducting group therapy. You might design and implement rehabilitation programs for people who are overcoming mental and physical conditions. Or you might assess and intervene for stress or other psychological problems in the workplace. You might provide medico-legal advice to the justice system or advise governments on health policy. You might end up teaching in an academic setting or training other clinical psychologists or other health professionals in clinical skills. And you might conduct and communicate research in clinical psychology to other academics or to the general public. So a very diverse career. I'm going to occasionally allow the voices of our students in our clinical program to explain some of these points, but this is a comment from one of our students who said that the ANU Clinical Psychology program has been a positively challenging experience. I've learned so much about psychology and myself as a result of this program. The best part is that I'm still learning, but I've already made a change in my clients' lives by employing the skills and knowledge I have gained throughout this program. I feel confident in my abilities and knowledge because I've been taught by the best of the best with years and years of experience, and it's been an awesome ride. The main point that I wanted to highlight in that quotation is that being a psychologist is about being of assistance. So if you have a strong passion for helping others, then this is a good career for you. Okay, so we have 2 degrees in clinical psychology. One's a Master of Clinical Psychology. It's a 2-year full-time program, which you can also do on a part-time basis. I've given you some indicative annual fees there, and our students in the MCP are eligible to apply for AusStudy. The PhD is a 4-year full-time program, which again can be done on a part-time basis. And I've given some indicative fees there. Note that for domestic students, the PhD in clinical psychology has no fees. And people who are doing a PhD are also eligible for applying for scholarships. In terms of the 2 programs, they both involve a combination of coursework, clinical placements, where you're actually practicing your skills in clinical psychology, and research. The coursework component is completely the same between the 2 degrees, and the placement hours are also exactly the same. So you spend 1,000 hours on clinical placement over the course of your degree. The extra 2 years of the PhD is devoted to research. Both of these degrees enthusiastically embrace the scientist practitioner model. That means that we equally emphasise the importance of developing your skills as a researcher and your skills as a clinician, because both of those skills are equally important in being a clinical psychologist. What are the defining characteristics of our clinical program? The ANU Clinical Psychology program, our students in our program are supported to perform to a consistently high and professional standard in a culture that actively promotes student wellbeing. How do we go about doing that? We make sure that as staff that we're highly accessible to our students in all components, in the coursework, when they're doing placements, when they're doing their research. We make sure that our teaching is conducted by experts, so we have broad-based expertise amongst our own staff, but when there are areas where expertise is lacking, we will bring in experts from across the country to make sure that you're being taught by the best. And we conduct our teaching in small classroom settings. So we have class sizes that are about half the size of other clinical programs. So many other clinical programs have 25 or more students in a class. And because we have those small class sizes, it means that you get lots of one-on-one attention. We also, all of the staff in the clinical program meet on a monthly basis, and part of that meeting is dedicated to checking in with how all of our students are travelling, and if any are experiencing problems of either a personal or an academic nature, then we work out a plan of how we can best help our students through those challenges. And we also have a peer mentoring program. So as an incoming student, you would be paired with a senior student who can be there to provide you with advice, support, and general mentoring should you need it. And that's especially appreciated by people who are coming from outside of Canberra and outside of the ANU. Last year, we were really thrilled to be awarded the Vice-Chancellor's Award for programs that enhance learning, and that award acknowledged that ours is regarded as one of the premier clinical psychology programs in the country, and that the program is known for its rigour and high standards on the one hand, and also the quality and compassionate care of our students on the other. We firmly believe that if we are to help you reach your potential as a clinical psychologist and indeed as a human being, that we need to provide a highly supportive culture for you to do that. Again, relying on the voices of our students. I describe the ANU Clinical Psychology program as one that is thoughtful, rigorous, comprehensive and supportive. Standouts include the crafting of a culture that is intellectually safe and cooperative rather than oppressive and competitive. We have been humbled by the care and concern the clinical program staff have for their students' wellbeing and academic success. This is something that's been volunteered often by my peers in conversation and who, like me, feel very lucky to have. I also feel very much encouraged and supported to be the best version of myself rather than being forced into a cookie cutter mould. Students who graduate from our 2 degrees are then eligible for registration as psychologists with the Psychology Board of Australia, and with further experience in the form of a registrar program, you will then be eligible for endorsement as a clinical psychologist. Give you a bit of a sense of what the degrees consist of. So in both degrees, first semester of first year starts with Psychopathology and Intervention 1, which teaches you about anxiety disorders and depressive disorders. You do a course on clinical psychological assessment and a course on child psychopathology and intervention. And each of those 3 courses is integrated with clinical skills workshops so that you're learning to apply the skills that you're learning in your coursework. We also do a course in ethics in clinical practice, so that first semester is designed to provide you with a really firm foundation so that you're ready to begin your clinical work. In second semester, you'll do a course on Psychopathology and Intervention 2, where you look at substance use disorders and personality disorders, and you do a course in research methods in clinical psychology, which has, for example, a really fun workshop where we teach you skills in science communication. In your second year, you'll do a course on Psychopathology and Intervention 3, which looks at eating disorders, psychotic disorders and bipolar disorder. You'll also do a course called Specialised Interventions. So our clinical program is very much based on cognitive behaviour therapy, but we feel that it's also important to give you access to other treatment approaches to help you become a more rounded clinical psychologist. So, for example, you'll learn about acceptance and commitment therapy and dialectical behaviour therapy. But in this course, we focus on interpersonal psychotherapy and motivational interviewing. And then your final courses are ones on health psychology and neuropsychology for clinical psychologists, which includes a really wonderful workshop on psychopharmacology. We also do additional workshops, so working in multidisciplinary teams, working with Indigenous clients, and then we try to have at least one workshop a year that's student generated based on what our students are keen to learn. So for example, this year we had a workshop on sexual functioning and sexual therapy. We've had past workshops on schema therapy, trauma, working with transgender populations and so on. And we also have once a month a clinical seminar. Again, this is very much driven by student interest, where we will just bring a clinical topic of interest that we can get together as a group and explore. The research, so for the Master of Clinical Psychology, you'll do a single study, which is written up in the thesis in a form of a journal article manuscript. It's at least 5,000 words. The PhD is a program of research, which usually consists of about 3 to 4 studies. In terms of the topics that the clinical staff supervise, they're many and varied. For example, Bruce Christensen conducts research and supervises students in the areas of cognitive problems, for example, in schizophrenia and neuropsychology. Kristen and Rhonda Brown will supervise research studies on health psychology. Kristen and I both supervise studies on eating disorders, obesity and body image. Dr. Tegan Cruz looks at social processes that are relevant for psychological problems. Junwen Chen looks at anxiety disorders. Amy Dahl has an interest in cognitive processes in various forms of psychopathology, and she focuses a lot on how people process social and emotional facial cues. We have experts in child and family problems in Richard O'Carney and David Pasalic, and we have experts also in personality disorders, so Connell Monaghan and Amy Dahl. That's just our core clinical staff. As a student, you have access to all of the RSP staff and indeed academics throughout the university. We like to be generous in supporting our students in the capacity to undertake their research. So at the moment, students receive $500 a year to support them in conducting their research. They can apply for up to $1,500 for international support to attend conferences and $750 for domestic conferences. The final component is clinical placements, where you're practicing your skills as an emerging clinical psychologist. Your first placement is in our ANU psychology clinic. That's a year-long placement. You'll get to see adults, children and adolescents. You'll work one-on-one with your clients, but you'll also conduct some groups. You'll conduct cognitive assessments. So we're really wanting to give you a firm foundation in the various tasks and roles that a clinical psychologist is engaged in. We're very excited that we've now launched an e-therapy clinic where you will work with remote clients, and as COVID-19 has taught us the capacity to work using e-therapies is an essential skill for clinical psychologists. After your first internal placement, you'll do 2 external placements. They might be in public health settings, for example in ACT Health or New South Wales Health. You might be working here at the ANU Student Counselling Centre. You might be working in a private health setting or in Headspace if you're working with young people. Just to give you a bit of an idea of the breakdown of what the total 1,000 hours on placement look like. So if you are interested in applying for the ANU Clinical Psychology program, you are most welcome. What that requires is that we select candidates on the basis of their academic record. You need to have had at least some clinical experience. So that rarely involves paid clinical experience, but typically people have done some volunteer work. For example, you might have done a course with Lifeline. And we also look at your personal suitability for working as a clinical psychologist. We have a half-day selection process. In the past, we used to have just a single interview, and we decided that was putting way too much pressure on our applicants to shine for just that short amount of time that they had access to us. So we've now expanded that to a half a day, which gives you as an applicant an opportunity to meet with us. So we'll have morning tea with you. You'll meet current students in the program so you can get a student perspective on what the program was like, and we'll also give you a tour of the facilities so that you really get to know us as much as we get to know you. All applicants must have at least Honours 2A or an equivalent if you've done a graduate diploma. For international applicants, just be aware that you have to have had your qualifications deemed to be equivalent to a 4-year accredited sequence in psychology. And it's the Australian Psychological Society who makes that assessment. That assessment can take up to 2 months, so just make sure you give yourself time. You also have to have an IELTS score of at least 7 on all categories. Another student comment, I would describe my experience of the ANU Clinical Psychology program as inspiring. I've loved every minute of it. Key standouts have been the diversity of learning opportunities, support received by all staff, and perhaps what drew me to the program most to begin with, which was the interview process. I felt like a valued individual, not a number. And I've included that quote because I just want to let you know not to be intimidated by the application process, but we're really here to help you be your best and really shine so that we get to know you. There's some information about applying to the clinical program. The cut-off date is usually the 30th of September. I'm not sure, due to changes with COVID-19, if that will be delayed at all. So please, I've given you the web address there. Just keep going to there to get the most current information.